Our guest on this episode is Dawn Spinella. She's an award-winning writer, director, and producer with multiple short films active on the film festival circuit. She won the Alfred P. Sloan Award for Screenwriting and was nominated for the Humanitas Award while a grad student in the Screenwriting MFA program at UCLA. Dawn is also a filmmaking mentor for the Youth Cinema Project, Latino Film Institute, and currently in development as a producer-director on a faith-based feature. Her bio is impressive. Now let's get her in the creative seat. Dawn, we're going to talk about transformational screenwriting. But before we dive into that, please tell the audience about yourself and how you came to writing and directing.
Oh, okay. Well, hi, Sam. Thank you for having me here. It's awesome to be talking with you. So, I had a really interesting childhood, and I discovered television kind of late in life and films. I grew up a lot in the mountains, and you could say that I was like a little wild animal raised by some hippies off the grid. And I think because I was raised that way, it sparked a lot of imagination because, I had to play in the woods and create games and stories and all of that to keep myself occupied. And I read like crazy. And I remember though when I reached my teen years and I saw a few films. Cinema Paradiso was one of them. Room with a View was another, the Merchant Ivory film. And I thought, holy cow, these are amazing. And it was in that moment where I thought this would be an art that I would love to be involved with. I don't know how. I don't know what, but it sparked something in me. And then later on I ended up getting involved with acting and in theater, and I fell in love with words. I'd been reading forever anyway. I loved words, but when I started reading like Tennessee Williams, I went, "Oh my gosh, you get to create a whole world with these words." And and at that point I was like, "Oh, acting's so limited. It's the writing that you get to create the worlds with?" I knew that I wanted to write. I was in theater and I continued to act, but then I started to direct and just produce theater, always being creative, and started doing a little bit of writing. And it was at that point where I decided that I would one day go on to get my MFA at UCLA because I thought that in order to be a writer, you really had to study and learn. At that point, I wasn't even aware of what a script was, necessarily a screenplay. I knew about plays, but I wasn't really aware of screenplays because I wasn't in that industry yet. And it was after leaving the stage because acting became, it was like, it absorbed too much of my evenings. And I started acting on camera. That's when I discovered that, oh, this is the route into film. And that just, circular, I just went that route. And knowing me, I like doing one thing isn't enough. I'm curious and interested and I want to understand lots of things. But that's how I moved into this realm. I did study in my undergrad, I studied film and television and radio. My first script that I wrote was horrible, horrible. I had no idea what I was doing. And then a friend of mine said, "Oh, you should read this book, Lou Hunter's 434." And I went, "Oh, holy cow." And it kind of gave you a breakdown of how you could write and how you should write. And it was the beginning. And, Lou Hunter was the chair at UCLA for a long time. He developed the television writing program there. And to me, that was just like, yep, one day I'm going to study with this man. I know it. I'm just going to be there one day to really understand writing. And eventually I did. A lot of other things happened between that day and the day that I finally made it in. I had a child and that was completely derailed everything. But I was sitting in class with Lou Hunter and got my degree. And I'll tell you what, when I showed up at UCLA, I didn't know anything about structure, knew nothing. It was my weak point because I'd been acting, dialogue came very easily and naturally, and understanding character motivation was also in there already, but I didn't understand how to craft something to actually be able to tell the story. And of course, there's so much more than just that. That's how I came. That's the long version of how I came around.
No, that's inspirational. And what I took away from what you said is even though there were a lot of things that happened in between setting a goal for yourself and getting there, you didn't change your mind. You didn't let the things in between stop you. So that's always a positive, and something I like to restate is like most of us who are doing something or creating something, life is happening while you're trying to create. So you really have to find ways to push through.
Absolutely, Sam. And the thing is like life kept happening and happening and happening because if you don't have a goal for yourself that you stay focused on, it's very easy to get pulled to the side, right? To get distracted and you meet a guy or you do this or you meet somebody else or oh, this job offer comes up and it's too hard to resist, the money, all these things start happening just like a character in your play in your screenplay. If you don't keep that goal focused, it's too easy to get distracted. And then the years are gone instantly. I definitely I kept circling back to it. And that's how I knew it was the area that it was that passion rather than a vocation. It was the avocation.
Right, right. This is good. So, and it leads us into our topic a bit, right? Talking about transformation, transformational screenwriting. Let's define that. Can you tell us what transformational screenwriting is?
So for me, transformational screenwriting is about creating it's about creating a change in the audience as much as it is about creating characters who experience change. But even more importantly than that, it's being able to write something that can profoundly affect an audience and have an impact on them, something that can actually change a belief system or make them begin to question a belief system. To me, that's really powerful.
That's good. So it's like a character arc for the audience.
Yeah, right.
If
Exactly.
if our
Exactly.
audience, you guys know what we're talking about there. So, is there a process that you go through when you begin to write a script with this transformation in mind?
Yeah, well, that's a big one, right? There's so many processes. The first one is knowing what it is you want to achieve with the story, what it is that you want the audience to experience. I always say, what is it you want your audience to experience when I teach? What do you want them to experience? Because they could experience a really frightening film, and just be scared, right? That's cool. That's great. That's pure entertainment. They could experience a love story. They could experience humor. All of that's wonderful and great, but if you want them to experience a shift in beliefs or to begin to even approach that, you really have to know what that is, what that belief system is, and why it is that you think this can be addressed. And there are a lot of big issues out there in the world that need that kind of focus and attention. You can't address huge, huge, huge issues all at once. It takes that melting down like a water on a pebble. It takes time. But for your story to begin to make that kind of impact, you have to start somewhere. And so it's always that what is that change that you want to begin?
Just in keeping with transformational screenwriting and the process, how important is story to you then as a filmmaker?
Well, for me, as a filmmaker, story is everything. The whole experience hinges on a story. And if you don't have something strong and interesting and worth telling, then it's just going to bore your audience. Also, if you don't have a strong story, it's going to be really hard to make. Story is the foundation of everything, in my opinion. A lot of people rush into films without really fleshing out their story, and they do a disservice to themselves and to their audience. For years and years, and even today, I still do it. Everything I watch, I analyze, and it's just become second nature. I can't help it, unfortunately, because for a long time, watching films became something I didn't enjoy doing after I'd been analyzing and analyzing and analyzing. So I'm trying to find the joy in watching films again, but I can't help but analyze them because you can tell a story so many ways, right? There's so many ways to tell a story, and it's going to hit everybody differently. So my analysis is just one of many opinions, but I always look for why something doesn't work and how I would have done it in order to make it work. Or what are you trying to achieve? And so, how would we do that? So, back to your question, story is everything. Without a story, you don't have a story.
Yeah, I'm curious. Do you keep a running log of some of this analysis? Like, or do you just keep it in your head to use for the future?
Sometimes I write things down. I do have a lot of notes on different things. Oftentimes it's just a insight that I'll experience for no good reason. I'm driving along and I'm like, oh my gosh, this. But I'll tell you, like last night I watched a film that was out a few years ago or earlier this year, and the reviews. I watched it because the reviews were really interesting. It compared it to a Mammoth film. It had very interesting. It had all these great kind of reviews, but one said you could see the twists coming, and I'm like, "Okay, let me see." So, of course, I sat down to watch it, and I'm like, "Oh, well, yeah, here's the grift right now, and this is the grift, and then this is also going on, and this is going." So you could see them all coming a mile away. I could, and it said that the end wasn't impactful, and so I wanted to see for myself. So I watch it through the end, and I'm like, "Oh, man, it totally fizzled out." So that's where I sat and went, okay, how could I have made this work? What ending would have worked here? How far back do you have to go in the story in order to set up an ending? And of course, the whole time I'm going, okay, would I have switched this around? And could I have switched this around? And could I have done this because you're expecting this? In screenwriting, it's about circumventing or not delivering on the expected. So you can also use that expectation to thwart the expectation. So in other words, if you know that this is a grifter film and the audience is expecting the grift right away, okay, so you set it up, you made that grift, but you better set up the anti-grift early on, like there, because I want to be tricked. If you make it too easy, you lose your audience. So in that case, because I'm thinking about it, I'll just remember that. I'll just know, like I should write it down, but I rely on my memory. Probably a terrible habit.
I do the same. So it's a process of I know what I like, I know what I don't like. So when I'm reviewing a script that I've written, I kind of go through the thoughts about like what I don't like, what I do like, and see how it applies to this like new script. Also try not to repeat myself, too much.
Mhm, mhm.
That's good. That's good. Audience, pay attention to that. So that's a tool that you could use.
It's all about knowing what your audience expects and then somehow making sure that they don't get what they expect, they get something different and better.
Yes.
Because if you meet expectation, it's often boring
Right.
because they expect it. So you
Right.
have to switch that up.
Right. Right. Okay. So let's talk about you being a multi hyphenate. So as a writer, director, and producer, how do you focus or separate each one of these key roles and then find balance there?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I guess it depends. I remember, Sam, when we worked together on something and you said to me, "Okay, Dawn, it's time to take off your producer hat."
Yes.
And I
Yes.
think about that now and then. I just laugh and go, "Sam had a very good way of just holding the situation together and saying, 'Here it is.'"
Yeah.
So sometimes I have to be pushed into a role, you
Mhm.
know, um, and told where I have to go. But mostly the writing stuff takes place so early on. So that doesn't tend to be an issue after the script is finished and it's ready to go. And I do see myself, though, always, even as a director, as partly a producer, because if you're not paying attention, things can fall through the cracks. So I don't know if that's just if that's a control issue, but I am constantly aware of things. And it's really good to be in that position. I don't think it's that easy for me to just step away from playing multiple roles. But in order to do so, you just have to know, you have to make sure that you're surrounded by really good people that you trust and that can take care of things, and that communication has happened that there aren't large gaps for people to fall, for information to get lost in or for things to part in. So that's it's
What's not work. I had not
mm,
thought of writing as a collaborative sport, but it is, and it can be, and it can work very well in terms of expanding a story, right? Like those checks and balances. Is this character working? Is this plot working? How do
yeah.
I create this world that relates to someone other than me. So you just gave me a
Yeah.
great idea. I might have to use that.
I absolutely think you should. Now that I've used it, I don't necessarily want to go back to doing it the other way. It was so productive and so helpful. Distinctly or deliberately chose somebody who had strengths that I didn't have. And because it's a faith-based film, she has a lot of experience in the faith world. And I thought, this will be really helpful. Now, she went some crazy directions. God love her. She just did some amazing stuff that I never would have thought of,
Okay.
you know?
Hmm.
And that's cool because that's where it needed to go. Of course, I pulled it back in to, the direction that I wanted it to go in, but without her wild creativity, it might have just been, stuck in my own little avenue. I think that being able to do that requires you to not be precious about your own work. I had an instructor who would say, "Don't be precious, don't be precious, don't be precious." It took a long time to get that into my head. And being precious is that owning it and not wanting to take anybody's notes and not wanting to change anything and not wanting to throw anything out and just thinking that everything is just right the way you have it. Oh, hell no. Don't be precious. Don't be precious. But the novel I'm more precious with. Even,
Okay.
somebody could step in and help out, but right now it's just me. I almost feel like my novel's more of a poetry where the screenplay is a big picture, you know?
Join the community and spark creative conversation. Share what inspires, motivates, or triggers your creative self. We're on Instagram and Facebook at The Creative Seed. Yeah, so I'm going to look forward to reading that novel, Dawn, when it's
Yeah.
published. So,
Oh, man. Me too. Me too. I'm halfway through. I've been halfway through for
okay.
a long time.
Yeah, no, I get
I
it.
I did wanna say that the transformational screenwriting, that is a book on transformational screenwriting. My second I think it was the second script I wrote after I got into UCLA was a script about my grandmother. And the second it was the second script I think I wrote about my grandmother at UCLA, and it was a biopic, and I got really into biopics, and I started studying and trying to understand how do you write a biographical story? And I studied with Dustin Lance Black, and he had written Milk, and I I don't know if you've noticed in me, when I get interested in something, I really start absorbing as much as I can
Oh,
about
yeah.
it and studying and doing that. So I had started studying that, and I realized that all the biographical people I was interested in were transformational. They
Okay.
had a transformational impact on society or others in the world somehow. And I think that's where that joined for me because I really thought, oh, wow, okay, what if we could take that transformational journey of that person that impacts society in real life and put that into a story, that isn't necessarily their life, but any kind of story. So I started working on this just a screenwriting book on transformational screenwriting, expecting to be done within the next month and a half to 2 months. And I'm going to be looking for beta readers actually. So
I'll raise my hand.
I would love that. I would love that. I need feedback. I'm not precious. I want some good feedback,
Okay.
anything. So eventually I want to follow up with a biographical story because I've written so many now.
Okay. Yeah, no, we're going to look forward to that. I wanted to go back just a bit because you talked about your faith based feature film. So, can you tell us more about that project?
Yes, absolutely. So have you ever been sitting around with a friend, somebody, and you guys just start batting ideas around? And you're like, this would make a great story. What if this and what if that and da da da? Right. Okay. So that's kind of how this story came about. And I had never intended to write anything that was really faith-based, but then when I looked at what I've written, everything, almost everything had some connection to God in it in one way or another, whether it was about a homosexual and the church. It was my grandmother, a scientist who grappled with God. It was like there were always these levels of God within my scripts. And I realized I really found that interesting. So I decided, you know what? I'm going to try my hand at a purely faith-based script that feels more like a Hallmark film. I figured I would end up producing it.
Okay.
So we get started. We're brainstorming these different ideas, and I end up working on this project with this guy whose daughter wants to get into. filming and what she wants to be an actress. And I said, I've got this great story that I think she would be perfect for. And so, as it turns out, he's very faith based and had wanted to start working producing faith based films. So that mesh, it just started happening. So now we're working together and we expect to start shooting in a few months.
Oh,
So,
that's wonderful. So we'll get
yeah.
to bring you back once you are ready to release that because I'd love to be part of that. And I'll show up to your premiere.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's
Thank you. Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah. That'll be fun. That'll be fun. That's my first, I think my first directing. Yeah, my first directing feature.
It's a bigger job, right, than the
Oh,
shorts. It's a lot of work. The shorts can be a lot of work. So don't get me wrong. We
right.
spent a year working on a short. So I get
Right.
it. But feature, that's even a larger endeavor. So I'm rooting for you. I know it's gonna be great. And I look
Oh,
forward
thank you.
to just sharing in the
Yeah.
success of that. I know you got other things happening too. So you're going to be teaching screenwriting. Do you want to expand on that?
So I've been teaching screenwriting for a while, quite a few years. And a few years ago, Access Sacramento contacted me, and that's how we met, actually.
Yes. Uh-huh.
You came to Access Sacramento. They have writers. Well, anybody could take the class, but Access does this really cool thing called a place called Sacramento Screenwriting Filmmaking Competition, and then they end up helping produce in one way or another 10 short films that they premiere at this wonderful theater downtown. They had me come in to teach the class, and they do short films. They're up to 10 minutes, but the information that I teach is applicable to features or shorts or whichever length you're doing. So I have been doing that class now, I'm not sure, for 4 or 5 years, and we'll be doing it again on January 27th and February 3rd. It's 2 hours, and I love hearing the stories that come out of it. And I ask the students to come in with their log lines ready to go about what ideas they have, and then I try and help shape those ideas into 10-minute stories that they can tell. And sometimes, their ideas are all over the place, and sometimes they're very concise, and sometimes they just need more development. What the structure of that should be, what it looks like for 10 minutes, because you don't want to ramble in 10 minutes.
Right.
You don't have any time to waste if you want to tell a strong and fast story that moves your audience. So that's coming up, and it's a great little it's a great opportunity. It's very inexpensive. I'm not sure what they charge anymore, but you would contact Access Sacramento if somebody wanted to take it.
I did participate in a workshop and I was the student that walked in without an idea. I think we had our day one and I listened to you and I went home and still didn't have any idea. And then on the Thursday before the Friday where you wanted us to submit the scripts ahead of our Saturday workshop date, I hand wrote a script at work. And then I had to go home and type it up. And I was thinking like, oh, I don't know, like Dawn's probably going to be like poo-pooing on my on my little script that I felt like I just put out there. It was a fictional story, but based on characters in my life, so my dad and my brother. And I don't know if it's because it was Dawn being my instructor or like I actually am a great writer. I don't know. But I ended up being selected for a place called Sacramento that year and went on to win the Producer's Choice Award. So thank you, Dawn. That was a great experience. And you did not
Uh,
poo poo on my script, but you did make me work on it. So going back to her, like really focusing on the story and the characters and like your thought process, she did make me think, which helped with the revisions because there were like revisions after that initial draft. But the workshop is really good and helpful. And again, she's right. It applies to like all of your writing. I use those techniques in feature films that I'm working on.
that's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that story. I love that we met there. I vaguely remember, I remember the story completely, but thinking about the script, one, I didn't feel like it was a new writer script that you had turned in. And two, I would never poo poo on anybody's story. And three, I don't think your story actually needed a whole lot of work. I think it needed a little bit of focus. You had the nuts and bolts. So you were just there. Either you were listening really well and you said, okay, this is how I'm going to apply it, or else you just have this great knack or you've been doing it for a little while. I was really impressed. And I think with a little bit of shaping, I don't think your story took all that much to shape it up. And I can tell when I read what first of all, when I hear the idea, and two, if the writer will listen to me, they'll get in. Chances are they're going to be accepted
Mhm, mhm.
if the story works as a family friendly kind of story. But you have to really, again, it's like writers not being so attached to their version of it. And
Right.
that's fine if you are, but if your goal is to just write your version of it, then that's fine. If your goal is to get into this competition and see where you can go with it, then you need to listen to the direction to get there.
Right. And we could
um
even expand that a bit too. So if your goal as a writer is to get into a competition or get the film made, you know, you need a producer, you need a director to be attached to it, you need production designers, you need a whole team, and they have to buy in to the story based on that script that you have. So it's really important to be focused and to take the feedback that Dawn is talking about. So
In the first year that I taught it, there was one gal that I had sent her so many rewrites. She just kept sending it over again, sending it over. I'm like, okay, well, fix this, fix me to do this, whatever. And she told me at one point, she said she was in tears because she just like, how many times am I going to have to
oh
do
yeah.
these rewrites? But we worked on Smash, and I did like 15 or
Yes.
20 rewrites of that thing because it changed, constantly kept changing. We'll never know exactly why, but it did. And I was probably in tears. But yeah, so I fondly now call my class "There Will Be Tears" screenwriting.
Oh yeah, I like that. I like that.
I lightened up a little bit. Like, if you want to keep sending it to me, I'll keep giving you
Yeah,
those.
yeah.
But at some point, you're gonna have to say enough, enough.
Right, right. It's like, when do you say, I'm done? And that's a skill in itself. The start could be hard. To start any creative endeavor could be hard because life is happening all the time. But also, knowing when to say you're done is also another skill that we have to develop. Don, I want to ask you, just because I think it's the right question. Do you have a project that you are most proud of and why?
I'm really proud of the one that I wrote about my grandmother. I had known my grandmother was, geez, she was a young woman during the Depression, and she raised 4 kids, and she came out here to Sacramento, like, probably in the late 50s, early 60s, and she was just I think she had just started college when the Depression hit, and so she had to quit college, drop out, and then she got pregnant and had kids, and, it was like life just kept happening, and, I'd always heard the story about her. She died when I was quite young, so I never got the information. But the family history was that she had been really involved with the Aerojet, and well, we were supposed to put a man on the moon, right? And so
Oh,
she was
wow.
involved with the Titan rocket engines before we went to the next level of the Apollo. And I'm like, that's pretty cool. What happened? Well, then she passed away, and nobody knew the real story. And always wanted to write that story. I just didn't have the information. And when I got to UCLA, they have the Alfred Sloan Science Screenwriting Program. So Sloan finances these programs. They're competitions, and students can submit. They have all kinds of different grants that they offer. This happened to be the one if you were a student. You compete against colleges all over the United States. And so I submitted the idea of what I wanted to write without knowing how I was possibly even going to attack it. And I was accepted. So they accept only so many, right? And then you have to write the story. And what's cool was they hook you up with a science expert. So I was my first year at UCLA, and remember I told you I had structure issues, right?
Mhm.
So I'm like, I don't know, whatever. We'll see how this works out. I already knew I had the issues. And so I got hooked up. They accepted that. I got hooked up with a Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL guy, scientist. And he was amazing because as I'm telling him the story about my grandmother, I had already started doing research, and I had started researching the Apollo engines. And, you know, if it's anything like who wants to just spend their time learning rocket science? I did not, but I had
Mm-hmm.
to learn something because I wasn't sure how I was going to solve the problems that she faced. And I had to understand it. And then I meet with him and he tells me, your grandmother, her age, based on the time she was there, it was the Titan engines. And plus, I had started calling around. I'd started calling like all the old timers from Aerojet. I'm like, hey, did you know Mary Smith? Did you know
Oh,
it
wow.
was crazy what I was doing just to get information. And so it was really great to have that insight because he gave me this background of history that I didn't know. Okay, and then this is what happened. This is the best part. This is not the best part. There was a death in the family, and I had to come home, and it was over the holidays. We all hung out before the service, and this friend of our family, she'd been like an aunt to me all my life. She had passed away, and her brother was there. And he's like, What have you been up to? What have you been up to?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I'm working on a story about my grandmother, you know, and what happened when she was at Aerojet." He's like, "Oh my gosh, Dawn, I remember the night your grandmother came over. I sat there with my dad and your grandmother, and she told us the story." I'm like, "What?"
Wow.
And I got all the information from him. I know,
Wow.
right? Isn't that
Wow.
amazing? And it wasn't just one problem, it was two. I'm like, "Hallelujah, hallelujah."
That's great.
Right? Because you have like so structurally, two problems was way better than just one. And and my grandmother had Parkinson's, and when she was, young Parkinson's, they didn't treat it really. So I had that in the story idea. But it was him being able to give me the information that I was missing that made all the difference. Now I went back to my science advisor and said, "Okay, here's the deal. This is what the problem was." And then he was like, "Okay, so now here's the deal. Here are the ways this could have happened, da 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 da." So then it was I finished it, and I think I did 2 drafts, like, boom. Yes, hello, structure. I did it in
Yes.
2 drafts. Uh, and then I won. I won the Sloan Science screenwriting thing. So it was cool that I think I'm really proud of that just because it was a story about my grandmother. It was one of my first real scripts, and it was about science and family. And my mom read it and cried. And
Oh,
I'm like,
that's
"Of course she
awesome.
did."
That's awesome. It's really great that you could create something new based on something that was near and dear to you. And that something
Mhm.
is a loved one and their experience. So, and I think it's amazing that you had this relative just come out of the blue and have this missing piece of information because that doesn't happen very often. So, going back to like that faith-based element in your screenwriting, like that's a miracle, right?
Yeah,
Or akin to
yeah,
that. That's
yeah.
awesome. Well, Dawn, this has been a great discussion. Always love talking to you and working with you. You know, I admire you as a writer, but also as a person. You're very genuine, intelligent, down to earth, and warm. And so I always appreciate working with you in any and all capacities. And I hope to continue to do that. So I really thank you again for being here tonight. But before we sign off, do you have any parting words for our audience?
Well, first of all, thank you, Sam. Thank you for saying that. That's so nice of you. I feel the same way about you, so I appreciate that. It makes me feel makes me feel good. I want my time here on Earth to matter, and here's where I segue into those words. One of the things I have learned and am still learning in the last couple of years is you can be really hyper focused on achieving certain things, and that is not what matters ultimately. Ultimately, it comes down to the experience that you have here on earth every day and what you're doing and how you connect with other people. So put that first. It's been very hard for me. And that's going forward. I always want that to be the first thing that matters most is that experience and that connection. And when you have that connection, you're going to find the people that resonate with you. And then the second thing is don't waste any time. Don't waste time. It's fleeting. It goes by in the blink of an eye. It is gone before you know it. And you want both of the experiences of connecting with people and doing the thing that you love to do in life to propel you forward. And I said earlier that you can have a vocation, but ultimately it's where your avocation and your vocation meet that you experience what life should be, and so don't get so hyper focused on just having to achieve, achieve, achieve. Find the thing that you love most in life and connect with the people that you care about most. Then you're going to be a great writer because you can use that.
Right. And I think that advice applies to like whatever creative endeavor you're
Right.
involved in or you're interested in. So we're talking about writing, transformational screenwriting, but it could apply to a visual artist. It could apply to a music artist. Hey, I'm going to throw in like science is it's science. It's serious, it's scary, but it's also you got to be creative there too to solve like these world problems that arise. So whatever you want to do, don't waste the time. Don't waste
Don't
your
waste the
time.
time. Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I wish I'd known like it. I did know when I was 20 what I wanted to do, but I didn't think it was possible.
True, true. I think we all have a little bit of that. It's like, especially when we have families that love and support us, but they don't know that route. My parents knew
Exactly.
they knew to work. They knew to get your education. They also kind of encouraged us to be entrepreneurs, but how to get there was something that we had to learn. And so it was like we're kind of encouraging you to have this baseline start, right, with your education. Strive for something a little more, but you got to figure out how to do it yourself. And so
Yeah,
you
well, you can always turn to the people like you and find your tribe. You
Mhm.
find that tribe and find mentors, and you're going to find the way in. I think it's just being creative, figuring out how to be creative and to make that happen. But if you're there, it's going to happen. Oh, I also want to say, don't be precious. That's
Oh
another
yeah.
piece of advice.
Yeah, I
I want
like
to say that should
that.
be another book. Don't be precious.
Don't be precious. That
You'll
could be
get
your next one.
you'll get so much more done.
Yeah, I agree. All right, audience, we're gonna sign off. Audience, make sure we go check out the Creative Seat website. We'll have Dawn's bio on there. We'll have the link to this episode so you can find out more about her. We're gonna be looking forward to reading your novel when it's available. We're gonna be looking forward to feature film when it is released. I'm really excited about those two things.
You're going to be one of my beta
Yes,
readers.
yes, I'll be the
I need
beta.
beta
I'll
readers, so
definitely do
that's
that. So if you're interested, you can reach out to me and I'll connect you to Dawn. So we'll talk about that, and I'll also put it on the website. And then if you're in the Sacramento area and you're interested in taking the workshop, you want to register via Access Sacramento. So accesssacramento.org, I believe, is the website, and you can find them online. There are some great people, so definitely check that out. And we're gonna sign off. Thank you, Dawn.
all right. Thank you, Sam. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon. Have a great year.
You too. Thank you. Creativity. It's like learning to ride a bicycle. You get on it, you fall a few times, then one day you're riding along with all the confidence. Then you decide to learn a new trick. Make sure to like the episode and leave a review. Shout out to Dub Poet Production for the music. Samantha Gay Henderson signing off. Go do something creative.